So we're jumping into the origin story for Moses, this incredible figure in God's salvation history. And notice particularly who God actually chooses to use it throughout this story. It's often the way of God to use the undervalued, the underprivileged, the ones that you might write off. And he does that again here. So let's notice as we look at how the baby Moses was saved and what that might mean for who God is and the future for God's people. Exodus 2, 1 through 10. Now a man from Levi's household married a Levite woman. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She saw that the baby was healthy and beautiful, so she hid him for 3 months. When she couldn't hide him any longer, she took a reed basket and sealed it up with black tar. She put the child in the basket and set the basket among the reeds at the riverbank. The baby's older sister watched nearby to see what would happen to him. Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, while her women servants walked alongside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent one of her servants to bring it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child. The boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. She said, "This must be one of the Hebrews' children." Then the baby sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Would you like me to go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter agreed. "Yes, do that." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I'll pay you for your work." So the woman took the child and nursed it. After the child had grown up, she brought him back to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She named him Moses because, she said, "I pulled him up out of the water." This is such an awesome connection back to what we saw at the end of the previous chapter. Pharaoh's warped, kind of upside down view of how God wants the world to work is boys have to die and girls, you can let them live, because he even says, "Go throw all the boys in the Nile, but let all the baby girls live," because he doesn't think that they're a threat. But throughout this whole first couple chapters of Exodus, that whole narrative is flipped, and it's these marginalized women who actually have the upper hand. And so it was the 2 Hebrew midwives last week, and this week it's so full of mentions of women who were, for sure, taken for granted, undervalued, ignored, especially at this time, and honestly for most of human history. But there's so many different groups of women here. You have the mother of Moses with his his older sister, right? You have Pharaoh's daughter, rather, and her women, and then you have Moses in the middle of all of that. But it's these women, knowingly or not, actually furthering God's plans and making it so that everything that's about to happen can happen. One, I like the irony here that I noticed was the last chapter. Pharaoh specifically said, "Throw the boys into the Nile, but let the girls live." And, you could say technically she did that. She gently placed the baby in the Nile River, but she did in some way very subversive, but in a way also obeyed Pharaoh's command. There's several great connections here. One that I love to point out is this word basket here. It's actually in the Hebrew the word ark. And there's only 2 times in the whole Hebrew scriptures that this word shows up. It's in Genesis chapter 6 with Noah and the ark. And it's here with Moses being placed in an ark sealed up with black tar, just like the ark. That where God was sending this flood to bring judgment against all sorts of wickedness and murder in the world. And here we see, again, it should make us think back to Genesis chapter 6. What's going on in Israel's story that's a parallel to the flood narrative all the way back there? And what is this child going to become? Because we should expect great things. This child who is saved from calamity in an ark is going to come back and save his people. And so that's just something that we're supposed to see this child. Oh, this is not just a fancy story, a fun story to look at, but there's something powerful going on here. God is saving Moses as a precursor to what he's about to do for Israel. And again, just back to the way the women are playing a very prominent role in the beginning of this story. I think the biblical narrators, they are doing this intentionally. God's economy continues to subvert the power structures of their day and our day. And so in this heavily patriarchal society, God, while many times he condescends and acquiesces to a very messed up society, he knows that we're human, he knows that we're flawed, and he continues to use very flawed people all the way through. There's moments where his ideal shines through. And here he's saying, hey, I can work through women just as much as through men. This baby is going to clearly do great things. He's saved from the flood in the ark, just like Noah, who rescued God's plan and kind of put it back on track. But these women have a really prominent role as well. And I love just the absolute reversal of fortunes and irony that I notice here. His sister, it's Miriam, who we're going to actually meet later as a prophet. His sister is watching this all unfold, and Pharaoh's daughter is taking pity on this child, and you can imagine her saying, hey, what do we do next? And she comes out of the reeds and say, hey, well, I could go find someone to nurse that child for you. And lo and behold, she takes Moses back to his mother, who gets to then raise Moses for his whole childhood. And on top of that, Pharaoh's daughter pays her for the work. So now she's raising her own child, getting paid by Pharaoh's daughter to do it. And then at the end of his childhood, she adopts him and becomes... that's the rest of the story as we're going to continue to go. But how fascinating is that? Just the way to see God at work here is really stands out to me. He's working through the undervalued, through the ignored, through the powerless, and we should expect some great things from this child, but he completely just upends everything here. I love thinking again how God continues to use the people that we might just write off as not important, not powerful enough, not main characters in the story, and yet this part of Moses' journey would never have happened without the often undervalued women in his life. It was his sister, his mother, Pharaoh's daughter, and the way that they come around this child. We also saw that Moses is foreshadowing some pretty climactic events. He was placed into an ark, into the Nile, the same word that was used when Noah built that ark to rescue all the animals and that family from the flood. So we should that's just a little trigger, little hyperlink for us to think back, what is this child going to do? So take some time. What does this all say about who God is for you in your life this week?